The challenge, the arena, was massive, a place where warriors from all over the galaxy gathered to prove their strength and skill. Today, it was about to witness something that hadn't happened in centuries. The crowd roared with excitement, their voices echoing through the stone walls. The air was thick with tension, anticipation hanging in every corner. At the center of the arena stood a giant alien warrior, his muscular frame towering over everyone. His green skin glistened under the sun, and his 4 arms rippled with strength. His eyes were cold, filled with arrogance. His name was Grivok, and he was known across the stars as the undefeated champion. No one had ever dared challenge him, not because they lacked the will, but because they all knew they would lose. Grivok stood proudly, a grin spreading across his face as he gazed at the audience. His reputation was unmatched, and today, he was ready to crush anyone foolish enough to challenge him. He had been looking for a worthy opponent, but no one had ever stepped forward. Until today. "Who among you dares face me?" Grivok's voice boomed across the arena. His words were not a question but a challenge, a declaration of his invincibility. The crowd fell silent, their eyes flicking nervously from one face to another. Fear ran through them. No one wanted to die today. They all knew what would happen if they stepped forward. Grivok would destroy them without a second thought. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until one lone figure stepped out of the shadows. A human. The crowd gasped. The humans were considered weak, fragile beings. No match for the mighty warriors of the galaxy. They were known for their ability to survive, to adapt, but to face an alien like Grivok in combat was a death wish. The human stepped forward with a calmness that defied all logic. The human was tall for his kind, though not nearly as tall as Grivok. His face was stoic, eyes focused and determined. He wore no armor, no weapons, just the simple clothes of a traveler, his boots softly tapping against the stone ground as he walked. Grivok's eyes narrowed as he studied the human, could sense the fear in the crowd. It wasn't fear for the human, it was fear for themselves. They all feared what would happen when the human failed. But to Grivok's surprise, the human didn't look afraid. He looked confident. "Well, well," Grivok growled, his voice dripping with mockery. "A human thinks he can challenge me. Are you so foolish, or do you just have a death wish?" The human did not respond immediately. He just stood there, his eyes locked on Grivok's. The silence stretched again, and for a moment it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then the human spoke, his voice steady and calm. "I accept your challenge. I will fight. You—" Laughter erupted from the crowd. Grivok's expression twisted into one of amusement. "You really think you can defeat me? You are nothing but a fragile, weak human. You can barely even lift a weapon, let alone defeat a warrior like me." But the human didn't flinch. He didn't show any signs of fear. He simply said, "You'll see?" Grivok's grin grew wider. "Very well, human. Prepare to meet your end." The two of them stood there, facing each other. Grivok flexed his arms, ready for the fight. He could feel the energy in the air, the excitement from the crowd, but most of all, he felt the power coursing through his own body. No one, no matter how strong, could defeat him. He could see the human's stance, relaxed, calm. Grivok didn't know if that was bravery or stupidity, but either way, it didn't matter. The battle would be over in seconds. The arena grew quiet, again the tension building to a breaking point. Then the signal sounded and the duel began. Grivok lunged first, his massive body moving with the speed and precision of a predator. He swung one of his powerful arms at the human, the blow capable of crushing bones with a single strike. But the human was fast, faster than Grivok expected. He dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. Grivok growled, surprised. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Humans weren't supposed to move that quickly. Grivok tried again, swinging his other arm with force. But the human was already moving, ducking and weaving, narrowly avoiding every strike. The crowd gasped, shocked by the human's agility. They had never seen anything like it. Grivok's frustration began to grow. How could this be happening? He was the strongest warrior in the galaxy. This human was nothing more than a speck of dust compared to him. But the human was still standing, still moving, still evading every attack with an almost unnatural grace. Something was different. Grivok could feel it in the air. There was more to this human than met the eye. Something told him this wouldn't be as easy as he thought. The fight was just beginning, and already the alien warrior could feel his confidence start to crack. And in that moment, the crowd knew that this fight was not going to be like anything they had seen before. The challenge had been accepted, but the question now was, could the human survive it? The duel begins. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating, as the challenge was set in motion. The arena's massive walls seemed to close in, the crowd holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. They had witnessed countless battles, but this one felt different. It felt alive. It wasn't just another fight. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Grivok stood tall and proud, his forearms flexing with the promise of destruction. He was a living weapon, forged through countless battles, and he knew it. His mind already pictured the end. He would strike down this human with ease. His victory would be swift, and the crowd would cheer. But deep down there was a strange unease that tugged at him, like a whisper in the back of his mind. The human across from him stood still, his posture calm, even relaxed. His eyes were locked onto Grivok's, unwavering. His hands hung by his sides, no weapons, no armor. Grivok couldn't help but sneer. Was this human truly so foolish, or was he simply pretending to be brave? "You should have stayed in the shadows, human," Grivok growled, his voice a low rumble. "You're not fit to even stand in my presence." The human said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't react to the insult. It was as though Grivok's words didn't matter at all, and that infuriated him. The bell rang, signaling the start of the duel. In an instant, Grivok moved. His forearms blurred as he charged toward the human, each blow aimed with deadly precision. His massive fists cut through the air like thunder. The crowd gasped, certain the human would be crushed within moments. But the human, he was faster than anyone expected. With a speed that defied logic, the human darted to the side, slipping, just out of reach of Grivok's first punch. The alien warrior's fist slammed into the stone floor, sending a shockwave through the arena, but the human was already gone, rolling to his feet and moving with an agility no one had ever seen from a human. Grivok growled in frustration. "Foolish!" He swung again, this time with both arms aiming for the human's head. But once more the human anticipated the attack, ducking low, just as the alien warrior's fists collided with each other, causing a loud, bone-jarring crack. The force of the impact sent Grivok stumbling back, his balance momentarily thrown off. The crowd erupted into shock and confusion. No one had expected this. The mighty Grivok, who had defeated hundreds of warriors, was struggling against this unarmed human. The alien's reputation was starting to crack. "You are more than I thought," Grivok snarled, his voice laced with disbelief. "But you'll fall like the rest." The alien warrior's eyes burned with fury, his confidence now turning into something darker. This human wasn't just fast. There was something else, something he couldn't quite place. The human, for his part, remained calm, his breathing steady as he moved. It was as if he had studied Grivok's every move, knowing exactly how to avoid the alien's attacks. The tension grew with every second that passed, and the crowd could feel it. Grivok was no longer the predator, but the prey. Grivok launched, himself forward, his body twisting in an attempt to catch the human off guard. He swung with all his might, aiming to crush the human in one powerful blow. The human seemed to stand still, almost waiting, as if daring Grivok to strike. Then, just before the blow landed, the human moved. He didn't dodge or block. It was something else entirely. The human stepped into the path of Grivok's attack, but in a sudden burst of motion, he caught Grivok's arm mid-swing, using the alien's own momentum against him. Grivok's eyes widened in disbelief. The human wasn't strong enough to stop his attack, yet somehow he had managed to redirect it. In that split second, the human spun, pulling Grivok off balance and sending him crashing to the ground. The arena went silent. For the first time, Grivok was on the floor. It was a moment of pure shock. The crowd gasped in disbelief. Was this really happening? Grivok, the undefeated champion, on the ground, struggling to push himself back up. He roared, shaking with fury, and in a flash he was back on his feet, eyes blazing with hatred. The human had made a mistake. No one disrespected Grivok. He would make this human regret ever stepping into the arena. But the human wasn't done. He had a plan. He knew exactly how to play this fight. Grivok charged again, his fury blinding him. He attacked with wild force, no longer calculating but only seeking revenge. Each strike was brutal, but every time, the human danced just out of reach, his body moving with unnatural speed. It was as though the human had studied every movement, every pattern, every weakness. The alien warrior's breathing grew heavier. He was faster, stronger, but this human, he was different. Grivok could feel his confidence slipping, replaced with doubt. Why wasn't this human tiring? Why wasn't he slowing down? The duel had shifted. The human, now slightly bloodied but still standing tall, finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're too slow." Grivok's eyes flashed with rage. He had no idea who this human was, but one thing was clear. This fight had just become personal. And then, for the first time, the alien warrior hesitated. The human had no weapon, no armor. Yet somehow, Grivok had been unable to land a single, fatal blow. The crowd was on edge, their eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding before them. This was no longer just a duel. It was a battle for dominance. And Grivok wasn't sure who would win. But the question remained, could the human keep this up? Could he really defeat Grivok, the undefeated champion? As Grivok lunged for one final attack, the human moved again, his expression calm. But this time there was something different in his eyes, a hint of something dangerous, something that made Grivok's skin crawl. And in that moment, the warrior realized, the human wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to win. The unexpected strength. The atmosphere in the arena had shifted. What had begun as a confident, almost mocking duel now teetered on the edge of unpredictability. Grivok, the mighty alien warrior, was no longer the predator. He was the one being hunted. The air buzzed with electricity as the battle raged on. Grivok's body, built for strength and power, was a blur of motion as he swung his forearms, each strike aimed with the precision of a seasoned killer. But no matter how hard he tried, no matter how vicious his attacks, the human seemed to slip away, faster than a shadow, more elusive than a whisper. Grivok's frustration mounted. This was not how it was supposed to be. He had never faced an opponent like this, someone who could not only dodge his blows but make him feel vulnerable. Each time he thought he had the human cornered, he was wrong. The human was always one step ahead. "You think you can outpace me?" Grivok snarled, swinging both fists down at the human. The sheer force behind the blow would have obliterated any other opponent in an instant. But once again the human twisted away, moving in a fluid motion that made no sense for a mere human. The crowd watched in stunned silence. How could this be happening? They had expected a bloodbath, a quick end to the human's arrogance, but now they saw something different, something that even Grivok didn't understand. The human wasn't just skilled in combat, there was something else at play, something deeper, more dangerous, something in the way he moved, in the way his eyes never left Grivok's. A cold, unsettling feeling crept into Grivok's chest as he realized that the human wasn't fighting out of fear. No, the human was fighting with purpose, and that purpose was becoming clearer with every passing moment. The human's footwork was precise, deliberate, each step taken with the knowledge that he was not just surviving, but gaining ground. With every near miss, the human's confidence grew, while Grivok's arrogance began to fade. He was no longer in control. Then, without warning, the human did something that left Grivok utterly stunned. The human darted forward, into the center of Grivok's range, where no one ever dared go. He didn't try to dodge or block the next attack. He didn't back away. Instead, he stepped directly into Grivok's path in a move so unexpected, it left the alien warrior momentarily disoriented. Grivok swung a punch thinking the human would retreat again, but this time the human caught Grivok's arm mid-swing, using the warrior's own momentum against him. It was like watching a masterful dance. The human's movements fluid, controlled, as he twisted Grivok's arm, causing the alien to lose his balance. Grivok's massive body lurched forward, and in that instant, the human delivered a strike, a simple but precise blow to Grivok's exposed side. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Grivok's eyes widened as he felt the force of the hit. The human's fist had landed squarely against his ribs, and the pain was real, something he had not expected from this fragile, puny creature. Grivok staggered back, clutching his side, a sharp, burning sensation coursing through his body. The crowd was dead silent. This wasn't just an alien warrior getting knocked off his feet. This was a master of combat, a force of nature, actually hurt. The human stood still, breathing steady, his eyes never leaving Grivok's. There was no fear in them, no hesitation. Just a cold, calculating focus. Grivok hissed in pain, pushing through the shock, anger flooding his veins. "You think that hurt me?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. The human didn't respond, but Grivok could see it in his eyes. The human wasn't intimidated. If anything, it made Grivok more furious. "Let's see how you handle this," Grivok growled, his voice darkening with each word. He raised both of his right arms and prepared to unleash a barrage of crushing blows, each one aimed to break the human's defenses once and for all. This time, there was no more mercy. Grivok was fighting for his reputation, for his pride. He was fighting to prove that no human could ever match his might. But the human didn't back down. He stood tall, ready. And in that split second, Grivok saw something that made his blood run cold. The human wasn't even breathing hard. His eyes gleamed, a hint of a challenge hidden in the depths of them. The warrior swung down with all his strength, his fists like giant meteors. The first punch came down fast and hard, but the human did not move. Grivok was sure he had him now, but just before the blow connected, the human shifted, just a fraction. It was almost imperceptible, but it was enough. The human's body swerved just enough to avoid the punch, but that wasn't all. In the very same motion, the human swung his leg up in a smooth arc, hitting Grivok in the abdomen. The force of the strike made Grivok's breath catch in his throat. His knees buckled, and for the first time in the duel, his body trembled with something resembling weakness. The ground beneath him felt distant as the air left his lungs in a sharp, painful gasp. The human didn't let up. Using Grivok's disorientation to his advantage, the human pressed the attack, his movements a blur. Each strike, each motion was perfectly timed, as if every move had been rehearsed 1,000 times. Grivok's chest heaved with the effort to recover, but his mind was clouded with disbelief. How was this human doing this? How could he fight? With such precision, such mastery, despite having no training, no weapons, no armor? It was as if the human was not merely responding to his attacks, but anticipating them. Grivok growled in frustration, finally pushing himself back to his feet. His muscles screamed with fatigue, but he refused to show weakness. He was the strongest warrior in the galaxy. He had never backed down. He would never back down. He charged again, more recklessly now, throwing everything he had at the human. But the human, that human, was waiting. Calm, steady, controlled. Every attack was met with a counter, every strike a reply. And then, when Grivok was at his breaking point, the human did something that made the blood drain from his face. The human reached into the folds of his clothing, pulling out something small, a sleek metal object. It was a weapon, one Grivok had never seen before, something far more advanced than anything he had ever encountered. The weapon gleamed under the arena lights, and the crowd gasped in unison. Grivok's heart skipped a beat. Was this the human's true power? Was this the secret he had been hiding all along? As the human raised the weapon, the audience fell silent, waiting to see if Grivok could survive what was coming next. The alien warrior had underestimated him. And now, he was about to learn that the human was far more than just a weakling. The hidden weapon. The air in the arena was heavy, thick with anticipation. Grivok's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the human in front of him. The weapon that had appeared in the human's hand seemed almost too small to cause any real damage. But Grivok knew better than to underestimate anything at this point. The human's grip on the sleek metallic object was firm, unshaken by the weight of the moment. The crowd was on edge, their eyes wide with shock. No one had expected this, not in a million years. The human had been fighting with nothing but his body, but now it was clear he had something more. Something dangerous. Grivok's mind raced. Was this some sort of trick? Had the human been hiding a weapon this whole time? And if so, how had he managed to keep it hidden for so long? The weapon gleamed under the harsh arena lights, almost glowing with a strange energy. Grivok had never seen anything like it before. It was unlike any blade or blaster in his arsenal, or in any known arsenal for that matter. The metal was smooth and reflective, not like the crude weapons the lesser species often used. The human's weapon looked almost artificial, like something created by a race far beyond anything Grivok could comprehend. The human's eyes never left Grivok's, calm and steady. He wasn't even holding the weapon in a defensive stance. It was as if the human knew exactly how to use it and Grivok had no idea what it could do. "What is that?" Grivok growled, his voice laced with confusion and anger. "You think that little thing can defeat me?" The human's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, but he didn't answer. His body remained poised, ready for whatever came next. Grivok's muscles tensed, ready to charge, but the human held up the weapon, pointing it directly at him. The sleek object hummed, a low, almost eerie sound, and suddenly, the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. It was a sound Grivok had never heard before, like the very fabric of space bending in on itself. Then, the weapon flashed. A burst of energy shot out from the tip, so fast that Grivok barely had time to react. The blast was blinding, but Grivok's reflexes were sharp. He instinctively raised his forearms to block the attack, but the energy didn't stop. It pierced through his defenses. A shockwave of power slammed into Grivok's body, sending him flying back with an unholy force. His back hit the ground hard, the impact rattling his bones. Pain surged through him like a wildfire. He tried to move, tried to get back up, but his body felt wrong. The air around him seemed to hum, like the weapon's blast had left an echo in the very atmosphere. The crowd gasped, their shock reverberating through the arena. Grivok, the mighty Grivok, the undefeated champion, was down. Grivok struggled to breathe, his chest aching. The weapon had hit him like nothing he had ever experienced, and the pain was like fire coursing through his veins. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand, but it felt like his body was betraying him. His vision was blurry, and for the first time in his life, doubt crept into his mind. The human didn't move. He stood still, watching Grivok with that same unwavering focus as if he were simply waiting for the next step. Grivok's hands clenched into fists, his body shaking with rage and pain. He had been knocked down, but he was far from finished. He would not let this human defeat him. No one had ever defeated Grivok, and he wasn't about to let it happen now. "You think that little toy of yours can stop me?" Grivok hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "I'll crush you with my bare hands." But the human didn't flinch. He didn't even look threatened. Instead, he took a step forward, slowly, deliberately, and then he spoke, his voice low but full of a quiet intensity. "Your strength is your greatest weakness," the human said. "It's what will make you fall." Grivok's eyes narrowed in disbelief. He had faced thousands of enemies from every corner of the galaxy, and none had ever dared speak to him like that. And yet, this human, this tiny, unarmed creature, was speaking as if he knew something Grivok didn't. "Enough of your words," Grivok roared, charging once more, his fury turning into pure aggression. But this time, the human didn't wait for Grivok's attack. He didn't try to dodge or block. Instead, the human lifted his weapon again, pointing it straight at the alien warrior. This time, Grivok saw it coming. He knew the weapon would fire again. His instincts screamed at him to move, to do something, anything. But his body was slow, his movement sluggish from the pain that still coursed through him. The human was faster, always faster. The energy blast shot out once more, this time faster than before, the bright light of it searing through the air. But instead of aiming for Grivok's chest or head, the human aimed for his legs, targeting his lower body. Grivok's eyes widened as the blast hit him in the legs, knocking him off balance and sending him sprawling to the ground once more. His legs buckled under him, the pain so intense he could barely think. His muscles refused to move, his once mighty body now helpless beneath the human's unrelenting assault. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Grivok fought to regain his footing. He had never been brought to his knees like this before. And the humiliation gnawed at him. The human stepped forward, his weapon still in hand, but this time there was no arrogance in his expression. There was no cocky grin. Just a quiet, calm certainty. "You're strong, Grivok," the human said, his voice steady. "But strength isn't everything." Grivok's eyes burned with fury. "You—" He struggled to push himself up, but his legs wouldn't obey him. He was trapped. "You think you've won?" The human stood over him now, his weapon lowered but still ready. The crowd was silent. They had never seen an alien warrior brought down like this. But Grivok's fight wasn't over. Not yet. "I haven't even begun," Grivok growled through gritted teeth. But the human didn't flinch. He simply stepped, closer, the energy between them thick with tension. And in that moment, Grivok knew something deep in his gut. This fight wasn't just about strength. It was about something far more powerful. Something Grivok had underestimated. The human had. One thing that Grivok didn't: intelligence. And in that moment, Grivok realized that no matter how strong he was, it would never be enough against an opponent who could outthink him at every turn. The stakes had never been higher, and Grivok could feel it in the air. The balance was shifting. The fight wasn't over, but it was no longer a battle of might. It was a battle of wits, and now Grivok had no idea what would come next. The breaking point, Grivok's body was aching. The once invincible alien warrior, who had terrorized countless planets, now lay on his knees, struggling to breathe. His massive chest rose and fell, with each labored breath, but no matter how hard he tried, the pain and humiliation seemed to settle deeper inside him. The crowd was silent, utterly still. They had never witnessed anything like this. Grivok, the alien gladiator, the undefeated champion, was losing to a mere human who had somehow brought him to the brink of defeat. But even as his body betrayed him, even as his legs shook, with the weight of his wounds, Grivok refused to accept the truth. He wasn't finished. No, he would never be finished. He would never let a weak, puny human be the one to take him down. He growled under his breath, pushing through the agony. In his limbs, his fingers curling into fists as he struggled to stand. Each movement was an act of willpower. He knew he was on the verge of collapse, but he also knew that if he didn't fight back now, if he didn't make one final stand, everything he had ever worked for, his entire legacy, would crumble. The human was still standing before him, calm and composed, like a force of nature in his own right. The weapon was still in the human's hand, but this time, it wasn't raised in a threatening way. It was almost as though the human had won already, and now he was simply waiting for Grivok to admit it. "You can't beat me, Grivok," the human said, his voice quiet but full of certainty. "You never could." Grivok's teeth ground together, his lips curling back in a snarl. You dare to speak to me like that?" His voice was rough, laced with pure anger. "I will crush you where you stand." But even as he spoke, a part of him knew the truth. He wasn't as strong as he once was. The human had already shown him up, had already outsmarted him at every turn. And now, Grivok was losing more than just a fight. He was losing control, something that terrified him more than anything else. The human took a step forward, his posture relaxed but full of purpose. Grivok, you think you've won every battle because you were the strongest? The human said, his tone low. But strength doesn't always win. Grivok's vision blurred. His mind was clouded with rage, his pride burning like an inferno. How could a human, a creature so small and insignificant, speak to him like this? And how could he be so confident? It was then that Grivok noticed something strange. The arena around them seemed different. The air was thick with energy, and it wasn't just the tension from the fight. No, there was something more, something the human had done. The weapon, the sleek alien device, had created a field, a kind of barrier around them, trapping them in their own isolated space. The human had done it without a word, without a gesture. The arena's lights flickered, and the crowd's whispers were drowned out by the strange hum of the energy field. It was as though the entire fight had shifted into another dimension, where only the human's will existed. Grivok blinked, his mind struggling to understand. What have you done? The human finally raised his weapon, pointing it at the sky. The energy field responded, amplifying with a pulse that made Grivok's heart skip a beat. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a force that controlled the very atmosphere around them. I've given you a choice, Grivok, the human said, his voice steady, unshaken by the power that now surrounded them. You can keep fighting, keep throwing everything you have at me, but it won't matter, because you've already lost. Grivok's mind reeled. He knew that if he didn't do something now, if he didn't break free of this strange trap, the human would win. Not by brute force, but by something much more dangerous. Understanding. With a roar of fury, Grivok surged forward, his massive form moving faster than he ever had before. The energy field around him hummed, pushing back against his every movement, but he didn't care. He would fight through it. He had to. The human's weapon fired again, a pulse of energy so sharp and focused that it felt like the air itself was cutting into Grivok's skin. He ducked, barely avoiding the blast, but the pain was immediate. His body was slowing down. The energy field was sapping his strength, his will to fight, and that's when he saw it. The human's eyes were locked on him, not with hatred, not with anger, but with a kind of sorrow. Like the human had known all along that this was how it would end. The realization hit Grivok like a hammer. The human was not here to kill him. He was here to break him. And in doing so, he would shatter everything Grivok had ever believed in. You think you are invincible, the human said, his voice still, calm. You think no one can touch you, but you've been living in a cage of your own making. The moment you stopped learning, the moment you stopped evolving, you began to lose. Grivok staggered back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The truth of those words hit harder than any weapon. He had always been the strongest, the most feared, but he had never stopped to question why. Why had he fought? Why had he come to this arena in the first place? He had thought it was for glory, for pride, for victory. But now, as the human stood before him, weapon in hand, Grivok realized something he had never considered. The greatest enemy he had ever faced was not the human in front of him, but the fear of losing. The fear that had blinded him. All this time, I don't want to defeat you, Grivok, the human said, his tone finally softening. I want to show you something you've never understood. You're only as strong as your willingness to change. Grivok's mind swirled. The human's words, so simple yet so profound, cut through the rage and the pride like a blade through flesh. The alien warrior, this unstoppable force, had been bested not by brute strength but by his own inability to adapt, to evolve. And in that moment, Grivok knew. The fight wasn't over, but it had already been decided. The human had already won. The final revelation, Grivok's mind was spinning. He had fought countless battles, faced warriors of all species, yet nothing had ever made him feel like this. Helpless, broken, and trapped. The human's words had cut deeper than any blade, and the power of the weapon that now hummed in the air around them seemed to mock him, amplifying his realization that he was no longer the strongest being in the arena. The energy field pulsated, with a rhythmic hum almost like a heartbeat. It was suffocating, wrapping itself around Grivok like an invisible cage, pressing down on him from all sides. He could feel his strength draining with every passing second, the air thick with the weight of his failure, but still he refused to bow. He was Grivok, the undefeated champion of the galaxy, and he would not be brought low by a mere human. No matter what, he would find a way to rise again. The human stood before him, weapon in hand, his stance unwavering. The look in the human's eyes wasn't one of arrogance. It was one of pity, of quiet understanding, as if the human knew what Grivok was about to face. And that knowledge only made Grivok's rage burn hotter. "You think you've beaten me?" Grivok growled, his voice thick with frustration and defiance. "You think this is the end?" The human's gaze softened, almost regretful. "Grivok, I've never wanted to defeat you for the sake of winning," the human said, his voice calm, unshaken. "I wanted you to understand that true strength isn't just about power. It's about knowing when to change, when to grow. And you've been stuck for too long." Grivok clenched his fists, the familiar anger flaring in his chest. He had heard this before, but this time something felt different. The words felt like a challenge, one he couldn't ignore. How could this human, this insignificant being, stand before him and lecture him? How could he dare to speak about change when Grivok had never been defeated? "You know nothing of true strength," Grivok spat, his body trembling with fury. "You've only ever relied on tricks, on deception. I am power incarnate. I've crushed every foe who has stood before me. I am not like you." The human's expression remained unchanged. He didn't respond with words, only with a small, subtle gesture. He raised his weapon slightly, pointing it at Grivok's chest. The energy field around them shimmered in response, and for the first time, Grivok felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. It wasn't a fear of death. No, he had faced that countless times. This fear was different. It was the fear of being defeated in a way he had never expected. Grivok had never considered that someone could defeat him not with strength, but with wisdom, with understanding, something he had long dismissed as weakness. The human didn't fire. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Grivok's. The arena was eerily silent, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, the human spoke again. "Grivok," he said, his voice low but filled with a quiet authority. "There's something you've forgotten." Grivok's head snapped up. What are you talking about?" The human's lips parted into a soft smile, but it wasn't a mocking smile. It was one of understanding, of compassion. "You've been fighting for the wrong reasons," the human continued. "You think that victory is about crushing your enemies, about proving you're the strongest, but the truth is, strength is something you can lose. Power can fade, and pride can break you." Grivok's chest tightened, and for the first time, his mind wavered. Could it be? Could everything he had fought for, everything he had believed in, be wrong? Was the strength he had built his entire existence around truly nothing more than an illusion? Before he could respond, the human lowered his weapon slightly and took another step forward. "I know you're strong, Grivok," the human said softly, "but what you've never realized is that you don't have to fight alone. There is power in letting others stand with you. There is strength in unity, in knowing when to trust others." Grivok's mind recoiled. Trust others? Trust? That word was foreign to him. He had never relied on anyone. He had never needed anyone. He had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the terms of every battle. The idea of needing someone else, of working together, it disgusted him. The human was now close enough that Grivok could feel the heat radiating off of him. But instead of the fear that had once been his instinct, something else filled Grivok's chest. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Doubt. The human's words were like a storm crashing against the walls of Grivok's mind. He had spent his life seeking power, dominance, and victory, but now he was confronted with something far more dangerous. the possibility that he had been wrong all along. The human's next words came like a hammer, breaking through the storm. You can keep fighting, Grivok. You can keep trying to prove you're the strongest. But in the end, it won't matter. Not if you can't see the truth about yourself. Grivok's heart skipped a beat. What truth? He demanded, his voice raw with frustration. What truth could you possibly know about me? The human stepped closer still, his gaze steady and piercing. The truth that you've been hiding from yourself. The truth that you're afraid of. Grivok's body tensed, his muscles coiling, ready to strike. But the human wasn't finished. The quiet wisdom in his voice cut through Grivok's fury like a blade. The truth that deep down, you know you can't do this alone. The truth that your strength isn't all that makes you who you are. Your pride, it's your weakness. The words hit Grivok like a blow to the chest. It was as if the human had taken everything he had ever known and turned it upside down. His pride, the very thing that had made him invincible in his own eyes, was the cause of his downfall. The realization was so sharp, so sudden, that it nearly stopped his heart. The human didn't move. He stood still, the energy field around them humming, growing stronger, as if to emphasize every word. Grivok's vision blurred. He staggered back, his legs trembling beneath him. The strength that had once felt so limitless now seemed so fragile, so hollow. He was a warrior, but now the weight of his pride felt like a chains around his neck. I'm not, Grivok's voice cracked. I'm not invincible. The human's eyes softened. No, you're not. For the first time in his life, Grivok felt the crushing weight of reality. His power, his pride, everything he had fought for. It was nothing but a mask. A mask that had hidden the truth from him for so long, and now as the human stood before him, Grivok had no choice but to face it. The final fall, Grivok stood in the center of the arena, the crowd's murmurs fading into a distant hum. The arena, once vibrant with the energy of battle, now felt empty, as if even the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every movement of the alien warrior felt like a slow, deliberate drag, as if his very soul was weighed down by the truth that had just shattered his world. His once powerful body trembled, not from the exhaustion of battle, but from something deeper, something he had never known. He had been an undefeated champion, a conqueror. But now, standing before the human, the truth echoed in his ears like 1,000 war drums. I am not invincible. I am not the strongest. The energy field that had once felt so suffocating now seemed strangely calm, like the air itself had quieted, waiting for the inevitable. Grivok's head hung low, his vision blurry from the clash of emotions inside him. The human, standing with his weapon still pointed downward, never moved. He didn't need to. He had already won, not by overpowering Grivok in strength, but by defeating the warrior's heart, by exposing the weakness that Grivok had buried deep inside himself. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that followed the end of a war, where even the wind dares not stir. You're not invincible, the human said again, his voice a whisper that carried across the now still arena. You never were. Grivok's heart pounded in his chest, the sound deafening in his ears. He wanted to scream, to charge forward, to prove this human wrong. But his legs wouldn't move. His body, once unstoppable, felt alien to him. There was nothing left to fight for. The human stepped forward, the energy field parting in response to his movement, as if allowing the inevitable confrontation. Every step was measured, deliberate. The human wasn't walking toward Grivok, he was walking toward the end. Why? Grivok's voice broke, raw and hoarse. It was a question he had never thought to ask, not in all his years of battle, not in all his years of glory. Why did you come here? Why fight me? You could have destroyed me at any moment. The human stopped just a few feet away from him, the weapon still lowered, but never leaving his side. I didn't come to destroy you, Grivok, the human said softly. I came to show you something you've never seen. I came to help you see that there's more to strength than how hard you fight. There's more to victory than who wins. Grivok's chest tightened, his hands curling into fists, nails digging into his palms. You think you've taught me something? You think you've beaten me? You've only humiliated me. No, the human answered, shaking his head. I've freed you. You were never meant to be this way, locked in a cage of your own making. You thought that strength meant being alone, that power was something you had to fight for. But real strength comes from knowing when to change. It comes from understanding that you don't have to do it all on your own. Grivok stared at the human, his gaze narrowed, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He had been the champion of the galaxy, the one who could conquer anything. But now, after everything, the defeat, the words, the exposure of his deepest fear, he felt as though he had lost everything. I am not a fool, Grivok hissed through clenched teeth. You don't get it. You think I am broken because of some weakness. You think that I should just give up everything I've fought for. No, the human responded, his voice unwavering. I think you should give up your pride. I think you should stop running from the truth. You can keep fighting, but if you keep fighting the wrong way, you'll only destroy yourself. Grivok's anger flared again, his blood boiling at the human's words. How dare he? How dare this human lecture him, a being who had crushed entire civilizations, a being who had known only one thing: victory. But then something happened, a small flickering doubt that Grivok couldn't shake. It was as though, deep down, a part of him was beginning to understand what the human meant. He had spent his whole life running from his own weakness, running from the idea that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't invincible. What would you have me do? Grivok demanded, his voice low, the fury in it now tempered by a flicker of desperation. Tell me, what would you have me do? The human took another step closer, his eyes never leaving Grivok's. Accept that you don't have to be alone. Accept that there are others who can help you, others who can fight alongside you. You don't have to carry the weight of the universe by yourself, Grivok. For the first time, the words didn't bounce off Grivok like the punch of a warrior's fist. They stuck. They lodged deep within him, shaking the very core of his beliefs, his pride, his strength. Could he? Could he really let go of the idea that he had to face the universe alone? Grivok's legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed, to his knees, the weight of his own realization crashing over him. His chest heaved, and for a long moment he couldn't speak. His body felt like a broken thing, a shell of its former self. His pride was shattered. The warrior who had stood tall and proud before the galaxy now crumpled at the feet of the human who had shown him his own weakness. The human stood over him, offering nothing but silence. No mockery, no satisfaction. Just the stillness of someone who had finally helped another see the truth. Grivok's voice finally broke through the silence, quieter now, softer. I don't know how to change. The human knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's okay. You don't need to know everything right now, but you have to start somewhere. And it starts with understanding that you don't have to fight alone. Grivok swallowed hard, his throat tight. The weight of those words pressed against him like a stone, but for the first time, it didn't feel like something he had to fight. It felt like something he could learn. The energy field began to dissipate and the arena seemed to come alive again, the murmurs of the crowd returning, the weight of their judgment slowly shifting into something else. Not fear, not anger, but curiosity. For the first time in his life, Grivok realized that he was no longer the center of attention. The universe didn't revolve around him. And for once, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a freedom he had never known. I am not invincible, Grivok whispered to himself, the realization still fresh and painful but somehow liberating. I never was. And with that, the battle was over. Not with a final blow, not with a victory or defeat, but with a moment of change. A transformation that would reshape everything Grivok had ever known. His pride, once unshakable, had crumbled. But in its place, something new had taken root, humility. And that, Grivok realized, was the greatest strength of all.